They tried to execute her publicly. Now her face is on every planet's flag, is the title of the story. In this story we discuss to execute Elira Voss to make her a warning, public, brutal, final. Instead, they made her immortal. Rescued mid-broadcast and reborn as a symbol of defiance, Elira becomes the face of a rising revolution that stretches across the stars. While the Empire tightens its grip through violence, she leads through belief, guiding scattered uprisings into a movement fueled not by force, but by hope, memory, and truth. As myths spread faster than missiles, and her image becomes a flag for the forgotten, Elira refuses the throne offered to her. In a war where data is sacred and stories are weapons, she becomes what the Empire fears most. Not a general, not a queen, but a living idea. One that cannot be killed. The air on Varela Prime was always dry, but today it was choking. Dust coiled through the plaza like a living thing, curling around the feet of the soldiers who stood at rigid attention, their faces hidden behind gleaming chrome visors. The square, a vast expanse of polished obsidian, reflected the overcast sky and the towering statue of Emperor Solon, a man whose empire spanned 13 systems and whose face never stopped smiling, even in stone. At the center of the platform stood a woman in chains. Elira Voss. Her name was not spoken in the official broadcast. On screen, she was referred to only as Subject X, 17, accused of sedition, incitement, sabotage, and a dozen other charges that blurred into one unspoken truth. She had scared them. Not with weapons or armies, but with her voice, her mind, her vision. She had once been an astrophysicist, working for the Empire's research arm, until she exposed their experiments on colonized planets. Until she chose truth over obedience. Now she stood still, surrounded by the blinding light of holocams. The execution would be live-streamed across every major planet. The Empire called it justice. Everyone else understood it for what it was, an offering. The judge's voice echoed from high above, projected from a drone that hovered like a vulture. Elira Voss, you've been found guilty by unanimous decree of the Council of Continuity. Do you have final words before sentence is carried out? Elira lifted her head. Her black hair, shaved on one side, fluttered in the artificial wind generated by the broadcasting equipment. Her eyes, a pale gray like cracked glass, scanned the crowd, soldiers, officials, journalists, and behind them, civilians crammed into security pens, watching in tense silence. She smiled. You are afraid. There was a murmur in the crowd. The drone dipped slightly, as if uncertain. You thought killing me would erase me, she continued, her voice low but clear, amplified just enough to carry. But you've broadcast my face to every world. You've ensured that even those who never knew my name now see me. And they're asking why. The judge's voice crackled. Silence the prisoner. But the text didn't move. The sound stayed on. I have no army, she said. No fleet. But I lit a match and you. She turned her gaze upward toward the drone, the symbol of imperial order. You brought the fuel. Two soldiers stepped forward. The device between them was sleek, silver, and humming. A beam disintegrator, supposed to leave nothing behind, not even ash. Just a flash of light, and then absence. Elira did not flinch. A hush fell as the machine charged. The light grew brighter, searing, and then, nothing happened. No sound, no beam. The machine clicked once, softly, like a throat being cleared, then went dead. The soldiers looked at each other, confused. The drone stuttered midair. Something had gone wrong. From the audience, pens came a sharp intake of breath. Then, far too loud in the silence, the sound of a child laughing. It wasn't a technical failure. Someone had sabotaged the system. Lock it down, shouted a voice, an officer, suddenly panicked. Lock it down now. But the plaza was already shifting. Power flickered. Screens glitched. The Emperor's face, usually plastered on every monitor, was replaced by Elira's, frozen mid-sentence, eyes burning like a promise. Then came her voice again, looped now, pulsing across the plaza. You are afraid. The crowd began to move. Not flee, move. 1,000 people, some pushing past guards, some falling to their knees, some simply staring at the screen, unblinking. In the chaos, Elira vanished. It was impossible. Cameras never looked away, soldiers never blinked. But she was gone, and in her place were chains lying empty on the ground, glowing faintly with residual heat. For days, the regime insisted she had been vaporized. They released a deepfake of her final scream, doctored footage of her silhouette engulfed in flame. But the original stream had already spread, fractured, and replicated through underground networks. And in every version of it, she stood defiant. She smiled. Then the system failed. Then she disappeared. On a mining colony orbiting the gas giant Varga 6, a technician printed her image onto a flag and flew it above a smog-stained tower. On the ocean world of Vasari, a group of former students projected her final speech into the water currents so passing whales would carry it. Even on war-ravaged Zinta 3, children painted her face onto the shells of abandoned drones. The Empire tried to erase her, but instead, they made her eternal. And somewhere, in a dark corridor beneath the shattered circuitry of the Varela Broadcast Center, a maintenance drone paused in its routine. Its ocular screen flickered, static blurring its vision. Then, in the haze, a woman's silhouette emerged, walking calmly into the shadows, her chains still clutched in one hand like a relic. She was not dead. She had never been freer. The flag appeared first on a forgotten rock orbiting the ice world of Tressa 4. A rough banner, stitched from scavenged cloth and fuel tarp, it bore her face, Elira Voss, eyes uplifted, mouth caught in mid-sentence, framed by the jagged halo of the execution scaffold. No one claimed responsibility. But within hours, images of the flag spread across illegal data streams, painted on walls, flashed through encrypted feeds, etched into sand by rebels hiding in the canyons of Marskin. She had vanished, but her image remained, an ember in a dying galaxy. In the slums of Hulver City on planetary ring world Paxum, 14-year-old Callow ran across crumbling rooftops, clutching a cracked data chip. He was no revolutionary, just a courier, a street ghost for hire. But the message he carried was different. It wasn't credits or contraband. It was her speech, remastered, translated into a dozen dialects, underscored by music that pulsed like a war drum. The kind of file that got you erased. He paused near an exhaust vent, panting, the weight of the chip in his pocket suddenly heavier than it should have been. From a distant holoscreen below, an Imperial broadcast played. The usual script. Heretics, sedition, threats to order. But Callow didn't hear it. His thoughts were filled with her words, the way her voice cut through silence like a blade. She'd spoken truth in front of death. He didn't know if she'd lived or died. But when she spoke, it felt like someone had finally seen him. Elsewhere, on the volcanic moon of Rendak, Commander Sia Krell of the Unified Miners Front watched footage of Elira for the 50th time. Krell had fought under 5 banners, lost 2 limbs, and buried both parents in the slag pits of the Rendak core. She wasn't easily moved. But Elira's defiance stirred something she hadn't felt in years: conviction. Not rage, not vengeance, but the quiet certainty that something must change. Krell turned to her lieutenants, rough men and women scarred by fire and grief. "We stop fighting for this rock alone," she said. "We start fighting for each other." From that day forward, the UMF's insignia was altered. Elira's face replaced the pickaxe and flame, a symbol reborn. On the outer rim, where planets spun untamed and wild, an aging AI warframe named TYRA-7 scanned decrypted pulse signals. Once a tool of suppression, it had defected after witnessing the Voss transmission. Though its processors could not feel, it began archiving her teachings, weaving them into new algorithms, spreading them across satellite networks disguised as maintenance pings. Her philosophy, resistance, unity, illumination, was transcribed into code and hidden within asteroid relay buoys, waiting for minds brave enough to receive it. The Empire noticed. Suddenly, flags were illegal. Possession of Elira's likeness became a capital offense. Military raids swept refugee colonies and underground stations. Memory banks were scrubbed, music outlawed, even colors resembling her signature spectrum were banned from visual media. Yet, the image persisted, spray-painted on walls, etched onto weapons, burned into the hearts of 1,000 movements. Admiral Cale Vex, chief architect of the regime's Propaganda Control Bureau, watched the unrest with boiling frustration. Every time he silenced a sector, another one lit up. He ordered deep AI sweeps, launched digital purges, burned entire data vaults. But Elira's myth had escaped containment. It wasn't just her anymore, it was what she represented. She had become an idea, and ideas, Vex knew, were harder to kill than bodies. Across this spreading wave, the question grew louder. Was she alive? Some swore they saw her, on the rim colonies in the mines, in the black markets of orbital cities. A woman in shadows. A voice in the crowd. Others said she'd become something more, fused with rogue AI, a ghost in the Empire's own systems. Skeptics dismissed it all, called it dangerous fantasy. But they could not explain how strategic wins were happening across resistance cells who had never spoken, never met, yet moved with uncanny unity. In a derelict temple on the jungle moon Envelos, a group of former scholars gathered, calling themselves the Voss Doctrine. They weren't soldiers, they were archivists, philosophers, exiles. But they believed. They collected scraps of her speech, decrypted footage, every whispered quote, and began building a framework. Part spiritual, part political. Not worship, but meaning. A new way to think. A new way to live. And at the edge of known space, orbiting the dead planet Mirian, a secret convoy assembled, smugglers, exiled engineers, alien tacticians, and disgraced generals. They didn't all agree on tactics, but they had one thing in common, the flag. Painted on their hulls, burned into their uniforms, carried in their minds. The face of Elira Voss, not as a martyr, but as a call to action. It was there that they decided to name themselves. The Unified Front. There was no official leader. Only encrypted guidance, broadcast at irregular intervals, always brief, always tactical. The messages ended the same way. You are the match. Burn what must be burned. And so the spark spread. On a sun-scarred planet where water was rarer than metal, a child drew her face into the sand before Imperial boots erased it. In the orbiting city hive above, a disillusioned captain turned off his security feed for 5 silent seconds. It was enough. The chain was growing. Somewhere, cloaked in the interference of a dying star, a ship blinked into stealth mode. Inside its hull, a woman removed a pair of restraints and tossed them onto a table beside an old, worn coat. She looked out into space, face half-lit by a broken screen looping Imperial footage of her own execution. She smiled just slightly. The war had not begun with armies. It had begun with an image. The courier ship Alethea drifted silently through the Terran expanse, hidden behind a cluster of black dwarf stars whose radiation fried most surveillance tech. Inside, within a dim war room wrapped in soundproof alloy, the true face of the rebellion sat before a fractured star map. Elira Voss, alive. Her hair was shorter now, unevenly cut with a field blade. Scars traced her arms like old scripts, memories of close calls, betrayals, choices. She wore no uniform, no insignia, but every movement in the room rippled around her as though space itself deferred. Her presence was gravity. She tapped the holographic interface, and the sectors lit up. Clusters of resistance activity. The shattered orbital ring over Khazar 9, the riots on Helios Station, the strike zones on Omutar. Each blinking red node was a wound in the Empire's skin. Across from her stood Commander Sia Krell, arms folded, jaw tight. Her cybernetic eye flicked as she analyzed the latest intel stream. 17 uprisings in 4 months, she said. That's not a coincidence. Someone's coordinating them. Elira didn't look up. They're coordinating themselves. They've seen the truth. It's spreading faster than we can manage. Sia raised an eyebrow. Truth doesn't hold territory. Weapons do. From the corner of the room, Callow, now 16, taller, leaner, still quick as a breath, leaned forward. He was no longer just a runner. He was a tactician in training, embedded with the command unit by Elira's own request. "Weapons can liberate a corridor," he said, voice low but sure, "but ideas light up the whole grid." A flicker of pride crossed Elira's face. Brief, but real. Still, Krell wasn't satisfied. "This cult of personality, it's dangerous. They chant your name in the streets. Some of them think you're a messiah."
"I'm not," Elira said.
"Then why don't you stop them?" "Because I can't," she replied, her voice quiet now. "Because we didn't build a rebellion. We sparked a reckoning. You can't order it. You can only guide it, and not for long." The tension settled between them like a fog. In truth, Sia feared what Elira had become. Not a symbol, not even a leader, but a mirror. People projected hope onto her, poured their fury into her image, turned her defiance into religion. The war was no longer about strategy. It was about belief. And belief was a wild thing. Behind them, a soft chime rang a signal. TYRA-7's voice crackled through the comlink. "Encrypted transmission received. Origin unknown. Decryption priority level, Voss Black." Elira straightened. "Display it." The room darkened. A hologram flickered to life. It wasn't a message, it was a warning. A massive fleet, 27 dreadnoughts strong, had mobilized from the Imperial core and was heading toward Zyral's Cradle, a free sector known for its alliance of refugees, farmers, and knowledge keepers. They had no ships, no weapons, just stories. Sia stared at the display. "They're not going to occupy. They're going to erase." Elira's fingers curled into a fist. The Empire had always operated like this, clean, public, and surgical. Destroy hope before it rooted. Callow stepped forward. "If we intercept now, we'll blow cover." "They're not ready to fight," Sia warned. "We are." Elira hesitated. A single wrong move could unravel years of work. The unified front wasn't strong enough for open warfare yet. But if they allowed the Empire to destroy Zyral's Cradle, it would shatter morale across the fringe worlds. She turned to the console, opened a private frequency, and recorded a message. Her voice came out steady, measured. "To the people of Zyral's Cradle, leave now. Hide your names, bury your stories. What you carry is more precious than any weapon. We will not let them erase you. And to the fleet coming for you, know this, you strike at embers thinking they are ash. But we are flame, and we are everywhere." She ended the transmission, then looked to Sia and Callow. "Prepare the fleet. We're not going to intercept." Callow's eyes widened. "We're not. We're going to get there first." The plan was madness. The Resistance had no warships to match the Empire's. But what they had were networks, smugglers, hackers, reprogrammed drones, saboteurs. Their power was not in brute force, but in unpredictability, guerrilla logic, chaos as art. And now, they would turn that art into salvation. In the hangar bay below, volunteers readied ships made of scavenged hulls and retrofitted engines. One freighter bore the face of Elira painted in crimson over a black starfield. Another bore only her final words. "You are afraid." The war wasn't just coming. It had already begun. And for the first time in decades, the Empire no longer knew where to strike. The stars above Zyral's Cradle shimmered unnaturally, an omen. Beneath them, vast fields of memory harvesters stood silent, their long limbs frozen in the dawn light. The people of the Cradle had not fled. They had remained. Not out of stubbornness, but principle. Their existence was resistance. Their histories, woven into living roots and encrypted seed stones, were too valuable to abandon. The Empire arrived just after local noon. 27 dreadnoughts, obsidian black and shielded by pulse-reactive plating, dropped out of hyperspace like claws. Admiral Kale Vex stood at the helm of the Dominion's Mercy, his expression unreadable. This wasn't war. It was extermination. "Begin targeting sweeps," he ordered. "No transmissions. No negotiations. Wipe it." But before the first cannon could warm, every screen aboard the flagship blinked. Once, then again. Static. Silence. Then, against protocol, the ship's central interface whispered in a voice Vex had outlawed 2 years ago. You are the match. Burn what must be burned. The screens lit up, and Elira's face stared back, no longer defiant, but calm.
Certain.
Chaos erupted. Across the dreadnought's internal networks, command lines rewrote themselves. Subsystems collapsed. Gravity cores surged and then collapsed into lockdown. Dozens of ships stalled mid-orbit, engines sputtering, navigation blinded. Vex bellowed for system reboots, but the virus, if it could even be called that, had already rewritten protocol command trees. It wasn't just sabotage. It was an ideological infection, coded in truth. Elira Voss had anticipated this. For months, she had coordinated with HFY 7 and the Doctrine to lace imperial systems with dormant thought logic, tiny, fragmented code poems that waited in the dark. The Empire had seen them as glitches, syntax errors. But they were blueprints. And now they bloomed. On the surface, unified front vessels descended. Not in rows, not in formation, but like falling stars. Civilian transports opened their hulls to deliver engineers, medics, linguists. Soldiers followed, not to occupy, but to shield. Commander Krell, her mechanical arm gleaming in the sun, landed first. She raised no banner. Instead, she approached the elders of the cradle and bowed her head. This time, we do not come as liberators. We come as listeners. Among the refugees was Callow, his face older than his years. He moved through the crowds, coordinating evacuation corridors and recalibrating defense grids, though many of the cradle's inhabitants refused to leave. What we know cannot be carried in bags, one of them told him. Only in minds. Above them, Elira remained in orbit, watching. She had not stepped foot on a world since her escape. Not because she was afraid, but because her presence caused gravity to shift. Leaders turned to symbols in her shadow. Actions warped into doctrine. She had become more than she ever intended. HFY 7 appeared beside her in the viewing chamber, holographically projected, data streams flowing through its form like veins. Transmission from Vex flagship, it said. Elira turned. Open it. Vex's image wavered. His face was pale, eyes wild. A man facing the void not with dignity but rage. What are you? He snarled. A person? A virus? A ghost in the system? I'm a memory you tried to erase, Elira said. And now you live inside it. You think this is victory? His voice cracked. You've turned yourself into a myth. Myths don't build worlds. No, she agreed. People do. But myths light the way. The signal cut. Moments later, Dominion's Mercy self-destructed in orbit, taking its command crew and 10 trailing vessels with it. No Imperial backup arrived. They were afraid to trace the infection home. For the first time in centuries, a full fleet retreated from a planet defended by belief. Weeks passed. Zyral's cradle was renamed. Not in ceremony, but in spirit. They called it First Ember. Not a capital. A beginning. New alliances formed. Not under Elira's flag, but around her truth. 1,000 symbols emerged, each reflecting her differently. Some showed her in silhouette. Others abstracted her into geometry. An eye, a flame, a spiral. She was no longer singular. She was collective. Elira watched all this unfold from the edges of known space. She refused titles. She refused thrones. She remained a shadow among comets, moving silently, her voice reaching only where it was needed. One evening, as Alethea drifted past the ruins of an abandoned Imperial archive station, Callow joined her at the viewport. He had changed again, his posture straighter, his hands steadier. HFY says resistance cells are forming on every inner ring world, he said. Even old loyalist sectors. She nodded. They still chant your name, he added. Even on planets where your face is outlawed. I never wanted that. Maybe not, but maybe we needed it. He paused. Are you coming back to First Ember? Elira didn't answer at first. She traced a star with her finger, eyes distant. When people stop needing to believe in me, she said softly, I will. Behind her, the ship's lights dimmed. A new transmission pulsed through the console, coordinates, encrypted in verses. A new crisis. A new call. She turned from the stars and walked toward it. The war wasn't over. But it had changed. Now it was being written not with orders but with songs. The next video on this channel is the last human walked into their war council and took command.